Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the Ordnance Training Support Facility in Fort Lee, Virginia, which houses much of the U.S. Army's firearms reference collection. And we're taking a look at some of the really cool stuff they have, in particular this thing, which is a TRW Low Maintenance Rifle. And to be honest, I've been wanting to get my hands on one of these for over a decade now. This is the result of a project that began in 1969 at ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, to look at small arms with a focus on reliability and durability. So the low maintenance rifle, the idea is what's involved in building a gun that will run for a long time without any maintenance and handling and cleaning and such, and also one that will run reliably. This is a project that fits very well into the McNamara era of Vietnam weapons development. It was, okay, you know, we've got all the old school gun companies, but we want to take new technology and mathematics and analysis and apply it to small arms design. So let's take a look at all the guns that have been reliable and durable in the past and see if we can mathematically bring ourselves to a new design that will be even better. So they tinker with this for a couple years, and in 1979, TRW gets a contract to manufacture this as their first iteration of the rifle. TRW, by the way, is one of the companies that was given contracts also to manufacture the M14. So they're in the small arms industry, but they're not traditionally a gun company. And they come up with a fascinatingly interesting rifle. So let's dig into this and let me show you how it works. All right, I can just barely fit this thing in. First off, this is a rifle with a rather unconventional layout. Obviously, you can see we have a side-mounted magazine, and we also have a side-mounted gas tube and assembly. It feeds from the left, it ejects out the right side. You'll see that there's a dust cover and an ejection port here. A basically perfectly inline bore, so your butt plate, which is actually a piece of canvas, is directly centered for maximum muzzle, minimum muzzle rise, maximum controllability. Let's take a look at the markings. All right, TRW Systems, this is the XLMR, the X, experimental low maintenance rifle, serial number 001, and this is chambered for 5.6 millimeter XM216. That is one of a series of fchette cartridges that were developed late in the SPEW program, the Special Purpose Infantry Weapon. The idea of fchette cartridges was that you would have a very high muzzle velocity, therefore you would have a very long point-blank range. You could increase effective accuracy by allowing soldiers to shoot to longer distances without having to consider drop. So the idea here is a target out to 400 yards, all you have to do is hold center and pull the trigger. You don't have to calculate a holdover. Now this is fundamentally sort of a flawed idea because the number of chances that a soldier has to get a clean shot at some guy at 400 meters and have the accuracy to actually make a hit at that range from a battlefield position is essentially zilch. But that's what they were going for. So we have a magazine release clamp here, spring-loaded magazine catch. This thing is like the uncanny valley of M16 magazines. We have over-travel stops front and back. There's the two slots in the magazine that the magazine catch locks into. And this is a cartridge that looks very much like 5.56 brass, but it has a shorter nose because it has a single flechette with like a plastic sabot over the front to assist in feeding and to keep it running down the bore effectively. So projectile weight kind of varied a little bit by manufacturer, but it was between 10 and 15 grains, and the muzzle velocity was no less than 4,700 feet per second. That's 1,400 meters per second for you metric folks. That is absolutely screaming fast, and it's what allowed them to have a 400-yard point-blank range. Magazine here held 30 rounds because the cartridge is basically the same size as 5.56. So double stack, double feed, conventional magazine, just not quite the same dimensions as an M16 magazine. Overall, by the way, the gun is very light and handy. It has about a 19.5-inch barrel, comes in at 7.25 pounds overall. Like really, really nice, lightweight, convenient gun. All right, let's take a look at some features. So first off, we have a front sight post up here on this really simple chunky stock that is used with a rear aperture sight. This is totally non-adjustable. Well, you can adjust the front for windage and elevation, but there are no range adjustments because that one peep is good for shots out to 400 yards. We have a birdcage style of flash hider, which I can unthread. We then have this sort of trumpety muzzle device. This, I believe, is part of the necessary mechanics to properly separate the sabot from the flechette. So you've got a little, basically a plastic housing over the flechette to ensure that it can cycle, feed properly, and so that you have this very small diameter dart going down the barrel. Something has to engage in the rifling, et cetera, et cetera. And you want to make sure that when that flechette separates from its sabot, it doesn't it doesn't deflect the flechette and impede your accuracy. So I think this is part of that. We've got some porting in here to control, to also have this work as a muzzle brake. Anyway, all right, we then have our gas port, gas block up here. Barrel is on the left. Gas piston, along with the recoil spring or return spring, is here on the right. You can take off the front, this nut on the front, to clean the whole thing out. Now for operation, this gets even funkier. This is actually a roller locked system, fires from an open bolt. It is select fire, or it's full auto only. It was intended to be used in like 3-round bursts. That's part of the idea of having the fchette cartridges, is they're also low recoil, increased hit probability. Again, very McNamara-esque sort of thing. Your charging handle is this set of knurling right here. So when I open this up, you can see the ejection port's covered by a dust cover. That dust cover opens, well, it doesn't move as the charging handle moves back. We have an opening now for ejection. It's then going to come all the way back. The dust cover stays in place. The bolt comes back to this position where it catches on the sear. It's now locked open. You can see you can just barely see the bolt back in there. This is the ready to fire position. When I pull the trigger, this will then close. The dust cover remains closed. As soon as it is fully in battery, the locking lugs, the locking rollers engage, firing pin hits the cartridge, fires immediately, and this then cycles open. And you can see our dust cover is going to open up when the cartridge is ejecting and remain closed at all other times, which is pretty cool and handy. Interestingly, they went ahead and used an M60 grip here. Like that's the flat spring to hold it in place. This is just a grip straight off an M60. We do have a safety selector on it, again, from the M60. It's just an open bolt, simple pull trigger, drop sear sort of fire control system. Just worth pointing out here, this is actually a gun that used to be in the collection of the Rock Island Arsenal, not the company, the government arsenal at Rock Island. They closed down, they rebuilt their small arms museum with a lot less stuff on display, and a lot of their guns came here to the Ordnance Training Support Facility in Fort Lee. So that's where this one came from as well. Anyway, moving back a little bit more, we just have this cover to extend the receiver back to a buttstock. Sling swivel here, and the butt plate itself is just a piece of nylon strapping, which is kind of an interesting idea. This is plastic. Like in today's world, this is absolutely the equivalent of a 3D printed piece. That's pretty much all of the features. Safety, the trigger is full auto only, and that's it. To remove the buttstock, we're just going to lift this up very slightly. It's a little sheet metal strap, and then I can pull this piece off the back, kind of like an FG42 stock. It just nests over the back of the receiver. You can see they've got a bunch of lightning cuts in this all over the place to minimize weight. We then come over here where we can take this lever, this sort of arm, and unlock that, this is what locks the recoil spring into the gas tube. So at this point, I can just pull out the whole gas piston, recoil spring, bolt carrier assembly all in one big batch. As this comes off the back, that is our bolt. That's just going to drop off. We'll take a look at that in a minute. Then we have sort of bolt carrier That's the lug that's going to operate the locking system. And we have our recoil spring, which ends in a gas piston. And then we've got our dust cover here. So this slides all the way forward and all the way back, and it'll come right out the back of the gun for disassembly. Then lastly, we can take off the grip assembly by pushing this flat spring down, rotate it out of position, just like an M60. And then we can take the pin out, and there is our grip assembly. So when I pull the trigger, it just drops that sear. That's all it does. When the safety's on, that safety bar physically prevents the sear from dropping. So very simple, easy part to just yoink off an M60 that was currently in production for the Vietnam War. So here's the rest of the receiver. It is very simple. We have a pair of angled dovetail rails back here. There you go, that's a better view of those. That is what the dust cover slides in, as well as this set of rails to keep the bolt carrier / charging handle assembly in proper position. You've got a trunnion and feed ramps inside there. That then transitions to this barrel with another plastic handguard over it. Now on the outside, you can see these two silverish squares. These are separate inserts that are the locking recesses. So you can see right in there, there's a semicircular locking recess. That is where the rollers go. These are separate because they need to be made of a different steel and heat treated differently to have different material properties to give them the toughness and durability to act as locking recesses, which you do not need on the rest of the receiver material. So taking a closer look at the bolt, we've got all the typical features. These are the two lugs that are going to pick up a cartridge. There's a slot in between them for the ejector. The ejector, by the way, is fixed in the receiver right there. So the bolt carrier has this lug on it here, which sits in that opening. And what that does is control this inner firing pin piece. So inside we've got this. The rollers, we have this, the surfaces up here at the front and back here on the sides. This is where the rollers go. So when the firing pin is lined up in this position, the rollers can push in because there's this area cut out for them. When the firing pin starts to go forward, these curves are going to force the rollers out. They're going to sit against these walls, and then they can't move. They're locked into these recesses in the receiver. That locks the gun, and this fires from an open bolt. So as this firing pin moves forward, so as that firing pin is pushed forward, as it goes into battery, it's going to push the rollers out like that, and then the firing pin is going to protrude out the breech face. There it goes. You can just barely see it there. That fires the round, and then it immediately cycles open again. And when this is cycling open, we have a delay period where that roller lug is in here, and it can pull this firing pin back about that far before the rollers are able to come in. So that gives the dwell time for the bullet to leave the projectile, pressure begin to drop, and render the gun, the barrel pressure safe for the thing to fully open. It is interesting to note here that the bolt is actually broken on this side, and that's why this roller can actually fall out. There is a little dimple in the bottom and a little nub that's intended to sort of hold the roller in position, prevent it from going too far, but when the outside of the bolt is broken, that doesn't work perfectly. All right, and so there you go. There is one fully stripped TRW Low Maintenance Rifle, the early version for the XM216 fchette cartridge. There were initially 3 of these rifles made for this 5.6 XM216 fchette cartridge. They went through testing. This particular gun successfully passed a 10,000 round endurance test. They also did some other testing, like some mud and dust and sand testing. And apparently it actually did fairly poorly in that testing, which seems odd to me because there is, like, that dust cover seems pretty good, but I guess I can see other potential dust and dirt ingress friction points. At any rate, after doing 3 of this, they then were directed to redesign the gun slightly to use standard 5.56 millimeter ammunition, not flechettes, regular M193 and M196 ammunition. They extended the magazine well a little bit. They set it up to use standard M16 magazines, and they made a couple other tweaks to the design. The most obvious one that you can spot in photographs is instead of this sheet metal tab to hold on the buttstock assembly, the 5.56 guns have a pin that runs through vertically back here. And you can see that pin pretty easily in most photos. So they made 3 of those guns, went ahead and did a bunch of testing on those. That actually solved a few of their durability issues. 5.56 was just easier to design the feed geometry and firing pin geometry for than the flechette cartridge had been. But by the time they're done testing those 3 guns, it's 1973. The war in Vietnam is coming to a close. Funding for new small arms projects like this starts to dry up, and so the whole thing is canceled in 73. And so ultimately, as far as I can tell, we only got 6 low maintenance rifles actually manufactured. So extremely rare, extremely cool. I actually have a manual for the 5.56 version that I've had posted on ForgottenWeapons.com for at least 10 years now. So you can check that out. I'll include a link to that, my article and that manual down in the description text. I would like to give a very big thanks to the Ordnance Training Support Facility here for giving me access to this unicorn of a gun to take a look at. Like I said, I've been wanting to get my hands on one of these for a very long time, so very exciting to do so. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you ever find yourself around Fort Lee, definitely check out the base here. They have a number of museums open to the public on base, as well as a pretty cool vehicle and artillery collection that is open periodically for public access days. So check out their website, and if you're in the area, see if they're going to be open. You can come in and take a look at some cool stuff here. Thanks for watching. Today's video has been brought to you by Headstamp Publishing, where we have a tremendous variety of extremely cool books that you might be interested in if you like guns and like learning more about guns. We have a couple different series of books. We have our flagship books that are academically in-depth. These actually began with my own very first book, Chassepot to FAMAS, on French military rifles. We have Jonathan Ferguson's book, Thornycroft to SA-80, on British bullpup rifles. Perhaps you've been checking out that Murdoch and Company EM85 and you think that's a pretty cool thing. Well, here is all of the background information you would ever want to know on the original British SA-80, what came before it and what came after it, what it developed into. We also have Rifles on the Danube about Hungarian AKs. We have Clockwork Basilisk about Collier self-cocking revolvers, a very cool, very much a forgotten early revolver that maybe actually should have invalidated Sam Colt's patent, perhaps. We then also have a series of more coffee table books. These are more photographic intensive. They still have a lot of information. You'll definitely learn something interesting out of them, but they're not really intended to be super in-depth collector's guides, rather an enthusiast's guide to a variety of different guns. We have our World War II series. Currently, we're in the process of filling out the whole World War II series. We have the small arms of World War II United States and Soviet Union available right now, as well as our book on battle rifles of the Cold War. That is currently our best-selling piece. People are really enjoying that, and I understand why. It is a gorgeous book on the inside. It turned out fantastically well. Very proud of it. We also have a number of other books that may interest you. We have one on Japanese imperial swords. We have one on tobacco of the emperor. Tobacco and pipes and cigarettes and matches are one of the surprisingly more common veteran bring-back souvenirs from World War II, and there's a lot of interesting history that you can get into with those. And then we even have a number of small pieces, things like Dolph Goldsmith's Arming the Dragon, about Chinese Mauser rifles. We have Who Invented the Wheel Gun, which is a compilation of a number of essays on the subject of, well, the early origins of the revolver. That was published in cooperation with Jonathan Ferguson's book, some of his work in there. All sorts of things for all sorts of firearm enthusiasts. So check us out at headstamppublishing.com. That link is in the description text below. We have standard copies, we have copies signed by the authors in most cases, and we have some truly beautiful collector editions in clamshell cases that are really nice. And of course, we still have a couple of books available for pre-order. So check those all out. Thank you guys very much for watching.